Hello and welcome to today's episode. I'm delighted to be joined by Mr. Mushtaq Rahim, a distinguished expert in peace building, international development, and geopolitics. Mr. Rahim has served as Deputy CEO of Afghanistan in High Peace Council, worked for nearly a decade with the United Nations Development Programme in Afghanistan and Syria, and has taught international relations at the postgraduate level in Kabul. He is a highly respected voice on Afghan affairs and regional security, often featured in international media. Today, we will be exploring the ongoing tension between India and Pakistan and discuss the potential effect not just for Afghanistan but for regional and global stability. Mr. Rahim, welcome to the Dr. Ayaz Safi podcast. It is a privilege to have you.
Thank you very much, Safi said. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Mr. Rahim, I'd like to start by asking how would you characterize the underlying causes of the renewed tensions between India and Pakistan, and why do you think these conflicts often tend to escalate so quickly?
To begin with, and to really look for the root causes of the problem, one has to really revert back to the historical context of this region, and particularly the relations between India and Pakistan. That starts with the partition of India in 1947, based on the two-nation theory that the Muslim leaders of the current Pakistan presented during the independence struggle of the subcontinent from the British colonization. And in 1947, when the demarcation lines were drawn and the two countries were separated, you know, a huge migration took place. People from the newly established Pakistan moved to India and vice versa. Muslims from the Indian subcontinent from India of 1947 moved into Pakistan. So many people from Bihar, from Bengal moved into the newly established Pakistan. During
Right.
that migration, a lot of violence took place, and that started a bitter feeling between the people of a nation which had hundreds of years of history together, having lived together even before Islam arrived in the region and afterwards as well. There was a lot of harmony. People lived in harmony. And of course, it was the British colonization which really was a time where there was anarchy, fights, and independence struggle against the British, and then afterwards the political struggle for independence of India. But the current situation that we see started as soon as the independence happened. The Red Cliff Line, that is called, that demarcated Pakistan and today's Pakistan and India, and of course at that time Bangladesh of today included. The decision was made that the regions dominated by the Muslim communities will go to Pakistan, and vice versa, the others will go to India. And there were princely states that were given the choice to join either India or Pakistan or remain independent. And as part of that agreement, the state of Kashmir, that was ruled by a Hindu prince, but dominated by Muslim communities. They decided to remain independent. They neither chose to go to India nor to Pakistan. That was the decision made by the region. But soon after, like Pakistan, using the irregular armies disguised as not armies but people infiltrated into the Kashmir state in a bid to take over the region, believing that the Muslim community will side with them and that will give they will topple the Hindu Maharaja, the ruler of Kashmir, and they'll take over the region. That didn't happen. There was a bitter fight that took place. Pakistan took today's Kashmir that is administered by Pakistan, but the Raja had to revert to Delhi, asking them for military assistance because they were faced by incursion by the irregulars into their territory. And the then Indian government gave them an option that they will only support if the Raja agrees to join India. And the Maharaja, the ruler of Kashmir, had little choice but to agree to this. The Indians came forward, they defended the Kashmir, and the war as intensified. The issue was taken to the United Nations for resolution because there was a stalemate on battlefield. A lot of blood was being spilled, and the decision was made that the territory that is taken by Pakistan should remain here, and the territory that is on the other side, if that decides to join India, let them do that. And a plebiscite should be convened where the people of Kashmir should decide on which side they want to go. Of course, the regions were taken over by Indians on the one side and the Pakistanis on the other side, and never that plebiscite took place. And that set the basis, the foundation for the continuous rivalry and animosity that had started with the migration among the people, the killing of the migrants and the people who were moving around between the two countries. And that was further established by the Kashmir war that happened back then. And starting from there, Pakistan and India have been fighting wars over the years. In 1962, in 1965, there was a 1965 war between India and Pakistan. And that happened in a backdrop where in 1962, India had lost a war to China,
Right.
and China had taken a certain amount of territory of India after having beaten them on the battlefield. And India was faced with significant economic crisis. Famine was there. People were dying of hunger. India was looking to have some assistance from outside. And that was the time when the Pakistani military establishment believe that they will be able to eliminate India from Kashmir, since they had been battered by the Chinese and they have economic crisis, people's morale is down, and that is an opportunity to hit Indians and take Kashmir in full back. And that's when an operation that the Pakistani military establishment named Operation Gibraltar was started. They started infiltrating different regions, including Kashmir. That turned into a full-blown war. And in
Right.
that full-blown war, as the Pakistani Ishfaq Ahmed and some other historians put it, the Pakistanis were badly beaten. Areas were taken by India, certain areas in Kashmir. Pakistanis couldn't take it. That resulted in a bilateral agreement that was signed in Tashkent between India and Pakistan, called Tashkent Agreement between Lal Bahadur Shastri and Ayub Khan. And the agreement was that we won't, I mean, of course, there was a lot of detail in that agreement, but one of the points that was agreed that there won't be any interference in each other's internal affairs. And internal affairs could be anything, including Kashmir, because that was
Absolutely.
administered by the Indians and vice versa by the Pakistanis.
Yeah.
But that 1965 Operation Gibraltar set a bad precedent for the region, where an established country believes in, goes in and invades. I mean, it does an incursion and tries to take over land, and that was a time that India believed that we have to be doing the same to them in order to defend our interest. And that was the time when actually established an intensified battle between the two countries, an ongoing war of interest between the two countries. And the approach to the bilateral relation was fully focused on realist theory of international relations. And that continued onwards in 1971, of course, due to the domestic problems of Pakistan. where Pakistanis did a lot of atrocities against the people in then eastern Pakistan, the Bengal of former Indian subcontinent, and today's Bangladesh,
Yeah.
where a movement called Mukti Bahani was started by the people, an effort to take independence from Pakistan. There is a whole lot of history around that, but I won't go into the domestic issues. That was an opportunity when India thought that this is the time to really hit back at Pakistan, and they supported the Mukti Bahani, gave them space gave them sanctuaries in India, and supported them, provided trainings to them. That resulted in the mass surrender of Pakistani army.
Yeah.
Unprecedented surrender of Pakistani army, close to 93,000, over 93,000 actually. Pakistani forces surrendered. They were taken over into the prisons as prisoners of war. India provided sort of security to these 93,000 plus soldiers. Otherwise, the Bengalis would have torn them apart, the level of anger that they had against the Pakistani forces. And as a result of that, the Shimla Accords were signed between the two countries, based on which the prisoners of war were returned back to Pakistan. And afterwards, of course, the Kashmir infiltrations continued from Pakistan's side, the Kashmir taken by India. India, after 1947, when they lost certain territory, that is today's Jammu and Kashmir, on Pakistan administered Kashmir, they have tried to avoid taking the issue to the international forum. And they believe it's a bilateral issue and should be. And Pakistan, on the other side, have been trying to take the issue to the international forum. So this continues to the bone of contention between the two nations. Now, coming to the two countries' approach to the bilateral relations in the realm of the international relation theories, the Indians have tried on many occasions. I'm not going to the whole history because there is a history related to Kargil, where Pakistanis did incursion. There was a war in Siachen where the glacier was taken over by the Indians. They came in and took over the world's highest battlefield, as they call it. I'm not going into all those details, but I give you some examples that set the foundation of this animosity and further engraved it over the years. The Indian approach to the bilateral relation, as I see it, has been more built on a mix of realism and liberalism. They have tried to establish a relation with Pakistan that is based on non-interference. They have tried to reach out to them and have agreements with them. For example, I can give you an example that when Kashmir decided that they didn't want to go with Pakistan, though the head of the state, the ruler, was a Hindu, an expectation of the Indians was that the ruler should join, Kashmir should join them. As happened in Junagadh state, a small state in Gujarat of India of today. Junagadh's prince believed that he wanted to go with Pakistan, where the dominant population was Muslim, Hindu, so that was based on the agreements that were made before the separation of the country.
Mr. Rahim, if I may jump in here. So, given the whole history of Pakistan and India being one nation separated into for all of those political reasons, and then ever since Pakistan's trying to oppress the people of Kashmir and then portrays it as this is India's fault, for example, or India is oppressing people and then portrays it as it's Pakistan's fault. Now, here, more commonly and more this contemporary issues, given that they're in more general term, they're one people, one nation, one subcontinent, why all of these escalation and conflict and threatening and these bomb blasts, for example, as it has recently happened? Why all of that? And how do you think, given that Afghanistan as a neighboring country between the two, and giving it a specific geographical and political positioning now, how vulnerable do you think Afghanistan is becoming an indirect victim of India and Pakistan, this rivalry?
And you have alluded to a very good point. That is why is all this escalation? For that, again, you have to look at the political system of
Mhm.
Pakistan, uh,
Right.
which has been dominated since the establishment of the country by the military establishment. The reasons of existence of the military establishment has been built on animosity with India. You know, since the Pakistan's existence, it is dominated by a military establishment, and the
Yes.
military establishment has justified their domination by presenting imminent threat emerging from India to the newly established Pakistan, telling their people that if the army does not defend the country, India would come over and take it over back, and uh, I mean, we will be overwhelmed by Pakistan, okay, by India, and that has been the narrative that they have been presenting as their reason of their existence. And based on that narrative, they have been dominating the civilian governments. They have been dominating the economy. They have been taking the major chunk of the national budget and making use of that for their own interest, including they have established private firms as
Yes.
Fauji Cement and other similar corporations that have been making them rich over the years. Now, in order to justify that the reason for existence, from time to time, they have to engage in wars, in conflicts at the regional level. You know, the Pakistanis being so far away from Israel have regularly been telling their people that even Israel is against their existence, whereas Israel there has never been any evidence of Israeli state trying to destabilize Pakistan. But that is the narrative that they present. And based
Right.
on that, they have to be engaged in continuous wars with the nations to keep their people at risk of war. Securitization has been their mantra, trying to, and of course, presenting the security dilemma as the reason for further strengthening the army that is there at the expense of the people's development, prosperity, and regional integration. You know, if there is no war with India, Pakistan can benefit from the large economy that exists in India. But then they have securitized India so much so that nobody can really ask about engaging with India. And that is the major reason that from time to time the Pakistani forces have to be engaging in wars to try in order to remind their people that, see, there is a revanchist agenda that is being pursued by the Indians, and if we are not there here, and if you don't support our existence and don't agree to the way we operate this country, you will be taken over by Indians. You know, I have lived in Pakhtunkhwa and have studied and got educated there. I've read the curriculum that is thoroughly built on hatred towards India.
Right.
They have literature that they produce. They have people on media regularly portraying India as a threat to their long-term stability and their existence. And that has been the reason behind the instability and unstable relations between the two countries. Vice versa, India, during the first 30 to 35 years of their independence, they were faced with the problems of their own issues with China, the border issues with China, the internal struggles. For example, Khalistanis wanted to have a separate Khalistan state. They had issues in other parts of India where separatist movements were taking place. Economy was at tatters. They were struggling for survival economically, and they had to be inward looking.
So given that, how does then Afghanistan, given that its specific geographical and political position right now, that Taliban are in power in Afghanistan, and the previous government has collapsed a few years ago, and Afghanistan itself is in a very unstable situation. Um, Given that these two countries are either threatening each other or fighting with each other, or one is kind of training the mindset of its people against the other, and so on, how do you think the Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan are vulnerable uh, and how do they become kind of the question I'm trying to ask here is, are the people of Afghanistan or Afghanistan itself politically or military wise could be a victim of Pakistan and India war at all?
You know, Pakistanis have always tried to, let's go again. I mean, there's a
Mhm.
lot of history attached to every
Of course.
question that you ask.
Yeah.
Afghanistan and Pakistan have had issues since the British era.
Yes.
We fought wars against the Brits. We conceded land as a result of that based on the Durand Line Agreement.
Yes.
And over the years, that have been issued. Okay. In 1947, when Pakistan was and India were given independence and Pakistan emerged out of that independence, Afghanistan claimed its right on the lands that were conceded to the Brits based on the Durand Line Agreement. And that was the reason that Afghanistan was the only country that opposed the membership of Pakistan at the United Nations. Just because we have issues with this country, they have taken over our land. We had given based on an agreement to the land to the Brits, and that has to be returned. And that was the reason that since the emergence of Pakistan as an independent state, Afghanistans have had issues with them. The issue of Pakhtunistan has always been at forefront. So
Yes.
we never were able to establish a neighborly relation. Forget about brotherly relation as presented by the Pakistanis. We never had stable relation between the two countries. But if you go back in 1965 war, Afghanistan did not remained neutral in that war. Though Pakistanis believed that Afghanistan may attack from Pakistan's western side on them to take
Mhm.
over its Pakhtunistan land, but Afghanistan did not do that again because it was against the Afghan values. One of the main Afghan values is that we don't attack our weaker enemy,
Yes.
and we confront them rather than attacking from the behind. And then
Absolutely.
again in 1971, when Pakistan was fully engaged, the whole military force was engaged in their battle with their own people in eastern Pakistan. That is Bangladesh of today.
Mhm.
Afghanistan did not attack. And this is something that I'm not saying as an Afghan telling you this, that we remain neutral and we respected our value of not attacking the weak and not attacking from the backside, from the behind. That is, there is a diplomat called Aslam Khatak, and he has a book, the Pathan Odyssey. He has detailed it. And Bhutto and Sikandar Mirza, on the two occasions, they came over to Kabul and they thanked in person the Afghan leadership for remaining neutral, for remaining, how do you say, humane, in a sense that we did not attack them when they were weak. That has been the Afghanistan's position. But there have been issues. An issue has been mainly the Pakhtunistan issue. Let me give you another
Please.
evidence.
Please.
One of the Pakistani writers, Juma Khan Sufi, he is Pakistani Pashtun nationalists believe that he is fed by the Pakistani establishment. But even he, in his book, claims that there was this guy from from the Sindhu Desh. There was a movement in Sindh, a province of Pakistan, where a group of people wanted to establish a separate country. And their leader came to Kabul and wanted to meet Daud Khan to help him, the president of Afghanistan, in
Yeah.
order to he continue his armed struggle in establishing Sindhu Desh. GM Sayyid was his name. And Dawood said, well, I'm not against Pakistan. My problem, my issue with Pakistan is that they have taken my land. I'm
Yes.
just after my land. And I'm worried about my brethren, the Pashtuns. It's not about that I want to harm Pakistan. And that is something that I'm not saying it's a Pakistan establishment fed Juma Khan Sufi writing in his book. So this has been approach of Afghanistan towards Pakistan. On the other hand, Pakistan has always supported any movement that has been against the state and against the Afghan governments, starting from the early 70s, where there was no communism in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was stable country. They housed some of the people, some of the dissidents of the of Afghan origin, Afghans actually, not origin, but Afghans, the dissidents. They housed them, they trained them, and they sent them back to wage a war against the Afghan state. Of course, later on, when Ziaul Haq took over and this Cold War era started, and Afghanistan became the hotbed of the Cold War, the hot war of the Cold War was being fought in Afghanistan. They supported all these Mujahideen groups. Okay. Now the Mujahideen struggle did start out of frustration of the Afghans with their rulers and with the and of course that was further exacerbated by the arrival of Russians to Afghanistan. But then there were many opportunities that the conflict could be settled in a better way through a political negotiation, especially when Geneva talks started in early 80s. The Geneva talks, the Pakistanis represented Mujahideen and always tried to somehow harm the Afghan state rather than the government and rather than facilitating a conciliation between Mujahideen and between the state. There is a book called Untying Afghan Knot. Another Pakistani diplomat, Riaz Ahmed Khan, has written that book, and he says that there was an opportunity that if we could have a Loya Jirga
Right.
in 85, 86, when the Russians decided to leave Afghanistan, we may not have ended up as 92, where the Najib regime was collapsed and brutal civil war was started.
Yes.
Pakistanis blocked that. So that has been the Pakistan's attitude towards Afghanistan. Now, in order to justify their actions, they have been always saying that India has been using Afghanistan against them. Uh, that happened during Dawood era. At that time, India was struggling for its own survival.
Yes.
They were economically down. They were militarily battered by the Chinese. Their lands were taken by the Chinese. They were in no position to take up fight against anyone. It was a battle of survival for Indians. It was only the 90s when India started establishing itself as a regional power. But Pakistan, in order to justify their actions against Afghanistan, and again, going back to the military, which always justified their existence based on their animosity with India, so they had to connect everything back to India in order to satisfy their people and justify their existence, and as such, preserve the resources of meant for the people, for the prosperity and development of the people, to expand it on their military objectives, to their security objectives. So they connected everything to Afghanistan. During the
Yeah.
70s, 80s, 90s, India was nowhere on the regional scene. Look at the Cold War time, Afghanistan issue. India, you cannot see it anywhere close to the scene. Yes, they have been. One thing I need to highlight, that India's doctrine towards Afghanistan, approach toward Afghanistan, has been that they have always believed in keeping their relation with the state, regardless of who is the state, whether it's a royal family of Zahir Khan or democracy of Dawood Khan or religio state of Burhanuddin Rabbani, or it is the Republic of Hamid Karzai and Professor Ghani.
Yeah.
All the times their priority has been to engage in relation with the state. And even today with the Taliban, they are reaching out, though they have a bitter history with the Taliban, because when during the last Taliban epoch of government in 1999, the Indian airline
Yes.
plane was hijacked and brought to Kabul, because of which Masood Azhar and other the prisoners that were taken by the Indians had to be released. I mean, that is a history that's not gonna get vanished just like that. But Indians believe in building relations with the state. And now, since the Taliban are the de facto authority, they've handed over the consulate
Yeah.
in Mumbai. They have given over the embassy in Delhi, and they remain in contact with the Afghan de facto authorities.
One of the
Vice
things.
versa. On the other hand, the
Yeah.
Pakistanis have always been connected to the non-state actors, especially the actors that have been fighting the Afghan state. Now,
Yeah.
that sets the scene for you and explains a lot
Yes.
the way the Pakistan have been approaching the relation between Afghanistan and India.
Absolutely, and I think that's a very good point. On that point, and you mentioned something earlier regarding the Pakistani approach towards Afghanistan, and especially that you studied in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa as well. One of the things we have been seeing, and in the recent history that I have seen in my lifetime, is that every time Afghanistan tried to establish itself a little bit, Pakistan have tried to destroy it by miles. One of the recent example is, even though that the history lessons that you just provided, given that it's an Afghan land and it was signed with the Brits at that time, and now it should be returned back. But look at what's happening to our people. Our people, the Afghanistan people, are being expelled by its very own land, by the government of Pakistan, purposely. And I sometimes think they are trying to provoke the entire nation to something bigger. A nation of Pakistan, the public, we respect them, we get on with them. But one of the things that they do is they raise their voices for Syria and Gaza and other nations, which is great. Anyway, there is an oppression, we should be raising our voice. But when it comes to Pashtuns or the Afghans on the other side of the Durand line, then the Pakistanis are quiet. Whether that's from the government side, or media, or the general public, they become complete silent. And I find that very, very hurtful and hypocritical. Also, Pakistan has been provide funding, training, and safe havens to the terrorist organizations. In a very recent interview with Sky News, the Pakistani defense minister was asked that Pakistan has had a long history of backing and supporting, training, and funding these terrorist organizations. And he openly admitted, and I quote here, we have been doing this dirty work for the United States for about 3 decades, and the West, including Britain. Now, I just want to kind of pick up your views on this. Like, what's your take on this? Someone like at a level of a defense minister openly admitting that, yes, we've been doing dirty works, whether that's in India or whether that's in Afghanistan or whether that's in Iran or anywhere else. Yes, we have been doing it, but you know what? We've been doing it for this, and that. What does this show, to the world that what's Pakistan is a snake. It's trying to oppress people and things, and then trying to portray as a victim. What's your take on this?
Well, let me begin with these refugees issue, which the Pakistanis have always been using as a pressure point on the Afghan states for the last 20 years, at least, or 25 years. They have been doing that. It doesn't come as a surprise to me. A state that oppresses its own people.
Yeah.
Go back to history, Balochistan. You
Yes.
know, Liaquat Ali Khan and Jinnah signed an agreement with Prince of Kalat in Calcutta, where they agreed to semi-autonomous state of Kalat and in Balochistan. Okay, and as soon as Pakistan's independence come, go and read Slug Harrison. There's a very good book on that that he has written. They take over the region, the Balochistan province by force, by killing people for the last 70 years. You see now educated people, the medical doctors, the physicists, the school professors are being
Yes. Yes.
forced to go and do suicide attacks. They're not lunatics. They're not extremists, but they're pushed to wall. Before that, go to Bengal. They killed their own people just because they wanted the right to speak their own language, the Bangla, a language that had a history attached to it, a language that had people like Rabindranath Tagore connected to it. They were killed, the professors and the students, just because they wanted their right to their language, which nobody uh, forgets. Okay,
Yes.
now go to Sindh, you know, uh, in Karachi, the people who migrated to Pakistan with a feeling that we are going to a home that will be ours, they have not been owned by the Pakistanis. They're still called Mahajir. After 80 years, they carry the Pakistani ID card. Go to the Gilgit-Baltistan, there people are being killed by these military establishment. Pashtuns, I won't talk about it. The whole world knows about it. They've always used Pashtun lands for their interests and
Yeah.
usurped their resources. The Minerals Rights Act was signed a month or so ago in Pakistan, where they will be taking all the resources. Balochistan produces most of the natural gas, but they don't have gas. The biggest province, the richest province, is the worst economically and from the public services perspective. I'm giving these examples to you. Even in Punjab, Punjab is only the area close to Lahore. If you go to the far areas of Punjab, so southern Punjab and other areas, people living worst possible lives in that Pakistani state. So if a country is so atrocious against its own people, what do we expect them to be doing to the others, be that Afghans or anybody else? I mean, don't expect much from them. So that's on that. If I can, what was the second part of the question? Use of the land.
Yeah.
Khwaja Asif gave half of these three. I can tell you again. He started it like from the Cold War era from 1979, but no, that started in 60s. Again, Pakistani former Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto has written a book, The Myth of Independence. And in
Right.
that book, he says that, Ayub Khan, the president of Pakistan in 60s, he went to the US Congress. And there, during his address to the Congress, he said that for defending the liberal world, of course, the Western world at that time, we had two blocks, the communist bloc and the liberal democrat bloc, right? And he says in Congress, and that's in his book, that for defending the liberal world, the Western world does not require anybody's permission for using the Pakistani land. So they rented their land back in 60s, back in 50s. So Khwaja Asif, for many it was like a surprise. Oh, the defense minister is accepting it. But there is a prime minister who was the foreign minister at the time when Ayub Khan said that to the Americans, they have always been a rentier state. They have been renting their state. The China-US relationship. They were the ones who facilitated as a rentier state between the two for their own interests. And there have been many other examples like that. So that doesn't come to me as a surprise. The
Right.
surprise comes to me that they try to tell the world that we did it for you. So does it mean that you are not an independent country? Or were you forced to do that? Again, the Taliban, they supported the Taliban in the 90s, left and right, okay? Nasirullah Babar always took credit for establishing the Taliban, right? He was the man, he called the Taliban his own kids. But when the day came in 2001, when, as Musharraf says in his book, In the Line of Fire, Colin Powell called him and asked him to, Richard Armitage called him and asked him either or, there is no gray area. And they went against the Taliban and against all the diplomatic norms. And over and above diplomatic norms, against all human norms, they handed over the sitting ambassador who had diplomatic status, handed him over to the Americans. They even sold their own people
They have.
to
Yeah.
the West. Emil Khan Kansi, he was a criminal, whatever. But the one of the attorneys, it's on the record in the US, said that why did we pay the Pakistanis so much money for this one man? And he used other words that I cannot say it here on air. But this rentier approach has always been there, and
Right.
that shouldn't come at surprise. But the surprise is that why Pakistani nation does not see it.
Yeah.
That was your question.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And my response to you is that, the Pakistani nation has been sort of monopolized from all perspective. When you go to school, you study a subject called Pakistan studies. This Pakistan studies, there is a book a Pakistani historian has written, KK Aziz, Murder of History. And he claims, if I'm remembering correctly, more than half of that history that is taught to the kids at school is false, is a lie, blatant lie. And there is another guy who does podcasts in Urdu, Mumtaz Ali Shah, Muzammil Ali Shah, sorry. He regularly cites all these blatant lies that have been told to the kids. When kids are grown up with all these lies and indoctrinated by the state, then media is controlled, under full control of military establishment. You know, if military doesn't like a politician, they
Yes.
cannot say his name on air. Imran Khan, right now, there is the ban on his name on Pakistani mainstream media. Nobody can even pronounce word Imran. So in such a country, when everybody is like, it's for me, it's a second North Korea, where everything is controlled, censored. Nobody is allowed to listen to the outside world, and anything coming from outside world mixed with the Pakistan studies literature is presented as a threat to the independence existence of Pakistan. And that's where people are duped by their own establishment. They've been told lies. You know, let me tell you, 1965 war, Pakistan started. The Operational Gibraltar was initiated by Pakistanis. It's on the record. Pakistani historians have written about it. And we always were taught in Pakistan that it was India who initiated it. They wanted to take over Lahore. That was not the case. The Kargil war, you know, they give medals to their own military personnel. There was a guy, Colonel Sher Khan. They gave him medals. But you know, they always said, well, it was not our military. It was the Mujahideen who went on to take over Kashmir. And those lies have been presented to their people over and again. In Pakistan, a sentiment was developed during the Republic time that Pakistan and India have joined hands, and because of that, for the purpose of destabilizing Pakistan. And that spice was sold to the people over and over again, as a result of which there has been a mentality developed among the people. Now, Afghans don't like Pakistan for obvious reasons that I've been telling you about the whole history. And they are justified in their position. But there have been Afghans who loved Pakistan as much as Pakistanis did, because they grew up in Pakistan as refugees. Even they were not spared, and they were made to turn against Pakistan by this establishment. This hatred is cashed in on by the Pakistanis. So the people who don't stand for Afghans, Afghans are demonized. The Afghan refugees are demonized, and demonized to the level that local people see them as their enemies. Let me remind you, Afghans were used as a cannon fodder in Kashmir by the Pakistani establishment. After Najib government was collapsed and the Afghans struggle for war ended in Afghanistan, of course, we had a civil war, but that was not an ideological war, right? They took all the ideological people to Kashmir, and Afghans fought in Kashmir as well there, and military establishment used their sentiments. But when the day came, they demonized the same Afghans, and they turned their own people against Afghans. And that's the reason I think the Pakistani people do not stand. They stand for Kashmir, Gaza, and anywhere else in the world, but they don't care about Afghans because of the demonization of this establishment.
I think that's a very good point. And again, like, you know, as you mentioned regarding Pakistan becoming like a North Korea, because are people really autonomous? Like, you know, do they really have a freedom as they claim to be free and independent? Is Pakistan an independent, giving like what the defense minister is saying, and of course the history book of myth of independing. I think you said about Zulfikar Bhutto.
Independence. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll definitely look into that book as well. So Pakistan here on one side, and I remember, I think the current Prime Minister of India was saying something that it's so difficult to hold any bilateral discussion with Pakistan simply because there is a Prime Minister, and then there's the ISI, and then there's the army side of it. We don't know who to have a discussion with, and they don't know, they're never on the same page. And again, as you have outlined throughout this discussion, that Pakistan army establishment is there, and they have everything privatized for themselves. And of course, in order to show that they are needed in the country, they have to conduct certain activities such as the recent attack, for example, in Kashmir, and also things that happen in Afghanistan across the border. But also, Afghans across the border on their very own land, I claim it to be. Of
Yeah.
course, it's a disputed land, and and it belongs to the Afghan people, and I am one of the Afghans, so I claim to be the owner of that land. To be honest, although that's a very some will say a daring statement, simply because Pakistan is approximately 79 years old, 79 to 80 years old. So where was Pakistan before that? And of course, you have outlined the history, but also these Afghans who are living across the border in their own houses, on their own land, is being oppressed by Pakistani government and the establishment continuously. If you look at any, for example, operations, military operations, it happens in KPK, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, it happens in Waziristan, it happens in Balochistan. Why aren't these operations taking place in Punjab or Islamabad, for example? Why is it always the Afghans or the Pashtuns that's been oppressed and then held as an accountable? But here are the hierarchy of Pakistan accepting doing the dirty jobs themselves. Based on that statement, do you think that the current ongoing conflict between India and Pakistan make any alteration to the balance or the influence among these external actors in Afghanistan, as well as more externally, for example, such as China, the United States, Russia, and Iran as well?
Okay, let me go back a bit and allude to another point. The Pakistanis, for the last 10 years, have been telling their people that it's a Hindutva, Hindu nationalist party that is
Yeah.
in power, and of course the Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP. BJP has always been against the existence of Pakistan and separation of Pakistan from India. But Atal Bihari Vajpayee in late 90s, just before Kargil war, took a bus ride to Islamabad, to Pakistan, and he was a BJP leader, a very respected, renowned Bharati Hindutva oriented Hindu nationalist leader. And he was there to set up the reset the relations with them. Kargil happened, and everything was done and dusted. uh, a Hindu nationalist. He invited, when for the first time he came into power during his inauguration ceremony, he invited Nawaz Sharif to that ceremony in order to establish a bilateral
Yeah.
relation with the civilian government. Again, similar Pahalgam sort of attacks took place in Pakistan, in India, Afghanistan. President Ghani, when he took office in 2014, um, his first foreign trip was to GHQ in Rawalpindi. Against all diplomatic norms, a civilian president went into the ISI and military establishment, and in order to talk to them that, listen, guys, our prosperity, our joint destiny, and our people's destiny is in cooperation. Let's sort out whatever we have between us. The response came further intensification of insurgency in Afghanistan. So, nationalists, religious nationalists, whatever, Pakistan, or liberals like Congress, during when Congress was in power during Gandhi's daughter time, Khalistan movement was supported from Pakistan's side.
Yeah.
We had Najib's communist-oriented leftist government. They fought against it. So their approach has always been to destabilize the region and reap the benefits out of it, be it from the West, from the US against the Russians, USSR of that time, or be it for the Chinese in order to keep the Indians engaged, and as such, because of that engagement, impede their development to compete with the Chinese. They are here to play the role of a rentier state. Now that clarified. Coming to your question, this approach of the Pakistanis in the region has not only hurt themselves but the whole region,
Yes. Yeah.
development of the whole region. You
Happens
talked
for them.
about the Waziristanis and operations against the Waziristanis. There are extremist right-wing parties in southern Punjab, sort of Lashkar-e-Jangavi and Sipai-Sahaba, that have been fighting the Shiais, and there is a whole history attached to it. They had the kind hand of Pakistan establishment on their head. The Harkatul Mujahideen and Hizbul Mujahideen fighting in Kashmir are established by the Pakistanis. The religious madrasas that have been producing fighters for the Afghan war, they have their kindness and the blessing of the ISI. And more recently, you know, the Salafi group of Afghanistan that moved to Pakistan have been the Pakistanis have been babysitting them, preparing them for future. So that sort of investment is happening, which means that they're not prepared to learn from the history where they lost wars to India, where they lost their eastern wing, a chunk larger than the current Pakistan, the
Yeah.
Bangladesh, where they lost the goodwill of all the Afghan refugees that lived for many, many years in Pakistan and studied there. They lost the goodwill of them. They lost the goodwill of their own proxies, that is Jamiat Islami of Afghanistan, that is the Hizb Islami of Afghanistan, that is the Taliban of yesterday and today's rulers of Afghanistan. They've been losing all these battles, but they don't learn their lessons. And that has been hurting a large population that lives within the current geography of Pakistan. People are struggling for survival. The debts are going higher. The quality of life is going down. Pakistan is on the lower side of all of the indices, whether it's a passport, it's a poverty rate,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah, yeah.
stability rate,
Yeah.
it's a security rate, but they're not learning the lessons. And now, as a result of that, the whole region is struggling because you know the conflicts. There is a study by the British economist Paul Collier. He says that any conflict in a certain geography has, if I'm not mistaken, the numbers up to 5% of influence on the economy of the neighboring countries. Of
Right.
course, the destabilization happens. Now, think of a situation where there is a free trade between India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Central Asia.
Yeah, that's
And
actually my next question. Yeah, yeah.
this region will develop and progress by leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
There's a lot of strength in Indian economy that can influence Pakistan. The Pakistani skill and machinery can contribute to development of Afghanistan.
Yeah, yeah.
Of grain that happens in Central Asia can feed most of India and Pakistan, including Afghanistan. That is happening right now. The gas that exists in Central Asia can fuel the industrialization and economic development of India and Pakistan, and of course, Afghanistan. Think it from that cooperation, liberal theory of international relations perspective, and I can tell you this region will grow by leaps and bounds. We have a SARC organization, the South Asian Regional Cooperation Organization,
Mhm.
that is now paralyzed at the moment because of the animosity and struggle between Pakistan and India. It's of no use.
Yeah,
Think
yeah.
of a SARC that is working like European Union. We will have development here. We will have prosperity. We will learn together and develop together. But right now, we are afraid of each other. Afghanistan is always concerned that the Pakistanis will use one more proxy to destabilize. They destabilized Dawood. They destabilized the leftist governments throughout the 80s. They destabilized the Mujahideens, trying to create a rift among the different parties. They destabilized the Taliban by siding with the West, whether Taliban were good or bad, but they were their allies, and
Absolutely,
they
yeah.
went against them. They destabilized the Afghan state of republic, and that resulted in collapse. And they are now trying to destabilize the Taliban,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
at the end of the day, yes, the destruction will be higher in Afghanistan. But we have a saying in Pashto that when there is a fire, definitely some of the sparks will go to out of that fireplace. So that will
Absolutely.
definitely hurt Pakistan as well. And that is the lessons that they are not learning.
And I wonder what satisfaction they'll get ultimately by trying to be having all these proxies, but also, keep destabilizing, one or the other, like as you mentioned, from 1980s, and and even beyond that, and up to now. I mean, we had a bit of a hope, in the last 4 or 5 years, that okay, the country was moving towards something good, and all of a sudden they played the dirty game, as they call it. But and the regional, well, risk to the regional countries, and with all of these cooperation initiatives like trade corridors, energy projects, or security framework, is also at stake. And I think the main player here is, or the main villain here, is Pakistan, that's trying to kind of go into each one's house, and try to set a fire. Ultimately, they will catch that fire, as you have explained, and burn down. But I hope, in a way, that they'll taste it, and learn their lessons. But in a scenario where India and Pakistan engage in a sustained hostilities, could then Afghanistan be pressured to pick a side? If so, would that be a diplomatically or military? And what would be the consequence of such a move? I know you kind of outlined the history of where we could have actually attacked them and get our land back, but giving the other values is that when you are at your weakest point, and we don't attack from the back or behind, so we would rather go to you face to face. So if they actually, they go into a war with each other, India and Pakistan, as they're currently threatening each other, what do you think the current leaders of Afghanistan, which are Taliban in charge now, what should they do? Should they take like a diplomatic approach, or should they take a military approach, and the consequences of that?
Afghanistan, as I told you, the historical facts as well, has always tried to remain neutral. And I think even in the current conflict, they have been neutral. They have denounced the attack in Pahalgam, the Afghan foreign ministry, and they had a statement issued. And my belief is that Afghanistan will remain neutral between the two neighbors. And I think that's the best approach to take. Even Afghanistan, of course, Pakistanis are not prepared, could even mediate, can be a trusted mediator between the two countries. Although we remain our Afghan state's legitimacy, the current government's legitimacy, not the state, the government's
Yeah,
legitimacy is questionable. We have de facto authorities. There is no de jure power and authority in Afghanistan, but still, Afghans can play a very important role between the two countries.
yeah,
We have had historically and even today good relation with the Indians, and that is all because we have tried to remain a responsible counterpart, an actor in the region. But the problem is, the Pakistan establishment is not interested in resolving the issues. As I said at the beginning, the reason of their existence is all about presenting an imminent threat being posed to Pakistan, even though nobody is bothered about Pakistan. Why would India would be bothered about Pakistan that is struggling economically and socially? And I say socially because every day vigilante killings are happening on the streets.
yeah, yeah,
People are killing each other based on religion. Uh, Ahmadis are being targeted, Shias being targeted, even women. The personal liberties of people are questioned because of the social implosion of Pakistani society. They think Indians are mad to take over a Sikh society. They are not bothered. Secondly, they are a regional power and trying to establish themselves a regional hegemon. They are competing with China, they're siding with the US. Are they really bothered about Pakistan? But no, Pakistan establishment have to portray them as an imminent threat in order to justify their existence, as I've been saying throughout this
yeah, yeah,
discussion.
yeah, yeah,
And in that kind of situation, when you have securitized all the relations, you're not interested in a liberalist attitude towards relation that is built on cooperation, that is sitting together and trying to sort out your issues, that is to find resolutions for the conflict. Nobody can help in that regard. Neither India nor Afghanistan, none of any other country, even the US and China, will not be able to support, because for China, regional security is significantly important. For them, a stable region means Belt and Road. For them, stable region is economic development. It's for them, a stable region is more supply lines to the outer world of their mercantile and all that. But the problem is that that will question the reasons for existence of the Pakistani military. And the Pakistani military is not prepared to concede what they have been securing and strengthening for the last 8 decades. That's not going to happen. I hope there is no war between India and Pakistan, because I don't see India getting anything out of this. Yes, there is a lot of pressure on Indian government from its people to revenge the Pahalgam attack, and they have to be presenting a brave face by telling their people that they will revenge the attack that happened on them. But my rational attitude towards Pakistan will be that India should not fight Pakistan, because Pakistan is already fighting its own people. They don't need any other fight. That's good enough for them. They're imploding internally. Until and unless the military establishment correct their qibla, as we say, correct their way of governance. They are actually leading the governance in Pakistan.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
Shehbaz Sharif and others, they are only proxies.
yeah.
Everything is with Asim Munir, who is the chief of the army staff. So what I'm trying to tell you is that Afghanistan should and will remain neutral, as we have been. We have been rational in our attitude, and we have been respectful in our attitude. We have respected our values, the Afghan values,
Indeed.
not the values that the Pakistani establishment that it borrows from their own culture, probably. We don't pursue that. And I think Afghans will respect that again and again. Though, from the realist perspective, that's not good attitude.
Yeah,
Idealism doesn't work in international relations. People do curse Dawood, people do curse Zahir, people do curse others who had an opportunity to take back Pakhtunistan by force, but they didn't do that because that was against our custom and values. But again, I believe we will remain restricted to and respectful to our own values and the regional stability.
and then looking now beyond the region, um, how do you think prolonged instability between India and Pakistan could then reshape the global security priorities? For example, especially in the eyes of major powers like the US, China, and Russia.
As I said, all of them would want to avoid any new conflict in the region. First and foremost, the Chinese, they would really, really want to have a stable region. They've been talking to the Indians, though they are not on good terms, because
Yeah,
India is clearly siding with the US during the time when the new world order is in making, and the US as well, that is bogged down in Ukraine. They have not been able to find a way out. They've been hitting the wall at all times. They're bogged down in the Middle East, and they don't want to open new front because they want to concentrate on Asia Pacific region. That is the region where they want to face off with China through trade war, through regional diplomacy, and through building alliances in the Asia Pacific. So they don't want it there. And India itself, that is a booming economy, but amidst being booming economy, they have their own internal issues. They have security issues. They have the imbalance of wealth distribution among the people in the nation. They have a large population to feed.
yeah,
They're working towards energy security. They're working towards food security, of course, towards physical security of their own people. They have their own issues, and they don't want that to further exacerbate that at a time when they are making the headways. India has been making headways. They have been capitalizing on the opportunities available to them in the global market. From the trade perspective, they are reaching out to EU, where they are working towards the free trade with European Union. They are working with the trade war that is currently, the tariff war that is being waged by the US. I mean,
yeah.
India has been a very calm, have presented a very calm posture in response, and that's why they've been able to walk along the US, and they are exploring an opportunity where they can reach the Indian markets more openly. Why would they want to engage in something fruitless gainless. There is nothing in it. Of course, it has a lot of gain, and a lot of interest is at stake for the Pakistani military establishment. But India, I believe, if rationalist attitude is adopted, they will not engage in fight with them.
My last question would be, given that some of this breaking news comes along more from the Pakistan military side of it, for example, they said, yes, we are ready to kind of attack India, whatever happens, we will kind of match their attack or and so on. And I know you kind of, alluded to and you kind of gave a good rationalized kind of overview there, but will there actually be all out war? As the Pakistani military is kind of keep saying, will there actually be all-out war between India and Pakistan? If so, will there be a winner given both nations have nuclear power?
Mm-hmm. Uh, you know, first we need to put this Pahalgam sort of attack and the situation and the war jingoism that is continuing in Pakistan, of course, in India for certain reason, because they are angered by the loss of up to 40 people. But the
Yeah.
Pakistani side, there is a reason behind that. Pakistani army is facing the worst of its kind vis-a-vis the people's support for the Pakistani military of the whole history they have. They lost the 1971 war, they lost the 1965 war, but they never lost the support and confidence of its people, thanks to the Pakistan studies and the monopolized media and literature and intellect that is produced. But for the last 5 to 8 years or even 10 years, every day the public anger and hatred towards the Pakistani military is exponentially increasing. Nobody is supporting them. Baloch are waging war against them. PTM is openly saying that all the terrorism is supported in the Pashtun belt by the Pakistani military. The people in Gilgit Baltistan, there was a demonstration in, I think it was in this Hazara region of Gilgit Baltistan, where they said that we will kill your military boys and put them into the dams, and you will find their bodies in Punjab. So this is a situation. A situation is brewing. People are really against the military, and Pakistan wants to continue this war jingoism in order to minimize that hatred towards Pakistani military and regain its prestige and position among the people. It has not happened over the last couple of weeks since, or maybe less than that, since the Pahalgam attack, I would say. And they would really want something to happen in order for them to re-justify their position, which has been lost, the position that they have lost.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is the thing. For India, as I said, I don't think they would want a situation where they have to redirect their energies towards Pakistan at a time when they are thinking of rivaling China in the region. And in that kind of situation, I don't think all-out war is a possibility at the moment, but you can never rule that out given the pressure from the masses that is coming on India. I see them doing some precision attacks on certain targets, but all-out war, no. If the all-out war happens, we know that both the countries have the stockpile that can destroy not only the region, but the entire world. I was reading a report that if both the countries use their stockpile, I don't know, our region won't be able to see the sun for how long. I'm not remembering the numbers. I usually don't do, but that tells you that it can have significantly bad consequences for the whole
Yeah, yeah.
region. And for us, that we are already struggling for survival. You talked about Russia. Russia is always concerned about the Central Asian region, where the Islamist movements have from time to time emerged and showed their presence. If instability exacerbates and expands, there is a possible threat to the security and safety of the Russian territory that may have a spillover from Pakistan, Afghanistan, all the way to Central Asia. So the international powers, I think they're not in favor of all-out war. My personal point of view, I won't really think of like there is a lot of Afghans wanting a war between India and Pakistan. Personally, I think no, there shouldn't be one for quite a few reasons. The first and foremost, Pakistani military establishment is imploding on itself thanks to their brutalities against their own people in Balochistan, in Pakhtunistan, in Gilgit-Baltistan, in Kashmir, Pakistani administered Kashmir, or as the Indian call it, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, in all these places, and even in Sindh, in rural Sindh. They don't need another enemy, another war. They're already waging a war against their own people. Secondly, the war, if it happens, it can have dire, it can have a dire consequences for the whole region. And for us who are already fragile, we are really, really fragile. And we cannot and shouldn't be expecting a war between these two countries, because it will have really bad consequences for us, instability, and this relative peace that we have, as in the conflict resolution literature call it, the negative peace. We may have that being challenged by insecurity and instability that we cannot really tolerate at the moment. So personally, so from the international powers perspective, I don't think they would want it. From the regional perspective, we shouldn't want it. From the Afghan perspective, we really don't need it. It's already going on. At my individual level, as a student of international relations, I believe this war is definitely going to bring more harm to the Afghan interests than benefit.
And on that note, I don't think anybody wants war. I don't think the people of Pakistan wants war. I don't think the people of India wants a war. But we hope that Pakistan will learn their lessons, and the military of Pakistan, and stop these proxies, stop killing people, stop destroying countries and the regions. And Mr. Rahim, I appreciate your input and thank you so much for your time. And I think we will reconnect again for definitely another episode. Thank you so much for your
Absolutely. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I'm really thankful to you by putting the Afghan point of view out to the world about the regional issues. And with that, just last point, I really share the desire and the dream that Pakistani military will learn their lessons. History tells us they didn't, they won't, and they will never.
Well, let's reconnect on that again. Thank you.